Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Papers Podcast. We are back, baby, from summer vacation. And did we ever have a good time? Because the four of us had a wonderful trip to Warwick to participate in the ASME conference. And we had such a wonderful time. Honestly, listeners, if you have never been to an ASME conference, you really must go. I had just the best time, and I truly think it is one of the best conferences in medical education. And not the least of which is because of all the wonderful people we met there. And as it should happen, we got an email, friends. And this email is from Lisa Kirchuk, and she wrote some really lovely things to us. I'm going to read you one sentence just to get our episode off to a great start. She wrote, I wanted to let you know how much I value the work you do with the podcast. It has introduced me to papers I would not have otherwise read and has helped me to really think more deeply about how to appraise the med-ed literature, which inspires me to keep developing my own scholarly skills. So, Lisa, we want to say thank you so much for that. And by the way, happy belated birthday. I understand it was your birthday on July 25. So a few days late, but all the best wishes and warm wishes for the years to come. But I realize that I have also not yet said hello to all of my friends. I'm just yakking at them. So first, let's say hello to John. Hey, John. Did you have fun at ASME, John?
It was amazing. I don't think that's hyperbole. I had a great time. We also watched England advance to the Euro Cup finals in a pub, drinking beer. Could there be any better place? I guess if you're not an England fan or you don't like football, that'd be a thing.
Or beer.
Or a pub.
What kind of crazy world is that? These are all the great things.
It's
also
like the restaurant you brought us to, John.
And friends, you heard some other, the rest of my colleagues. Linda, did you have a good time at ASME? That's Linda's phone. For the record, it's not mine. Just before I get in trouble for that.
Yeah. So hi, everybody. And yes, I had a fantastic time in England at ASME with a gang who's really interested in medical education and medical education scholarship.
And last, but certainly not least, Jason, it was so good to have time to catch up with you there. I'm sure you had a great time too.
I had a great time as well. They were wonderful hosts. If you haven't been to the ASME conference, it's special because there's a lot of learners presenting. So there's a lot of youth and a lot of energy. I do have a quick anecdote. I want to build on your little shout out because if I'm not mistaken, I think we met Lisa at the conference.
Yes, we did. We took a picture with her.
Yeah, a picture with her. Yeah. Okay, so that was nice. You know, she came and said, "Hey, I love the podcast. Can we have a picture?" That was really nice. And her friend was also there. I want you guys to know that the next day, someone else came up to me and said, "Hey, Dr. Frank, I want a picture with you." And this person had a bit of an accent, and they said, "Dr. Frank, I have a bias for you." Very nice picture.
A bias for you?
I'm like, I'm not sure what you mean by bias.
Maybe a bias against you?
No, what they meant to say was...
So they could be our friends then.
Yeah.
What they meant to say was I was their favorite. So I'm like, oh, thank you so much. Let's have a nice photo. And then I thought maybe they wanted to talk because they were interested in med-ed or something. And no, I was just a Pokemon that they captured. They just walked away. They didn't want to talk at all. There you go.
Thanks. Bye.
I felt special.
Never meet your heroes is really what the version of that anecdote is.
Or your fans, apparently. Anyway, I did appreciate meeting everybody. Thank you so much. I'm going to kick us off with a paper today. This is a paper about genius. So, let me connect this to you. Lara, you're considered kind of a med-ed guru, genius type person. And Linda, you're kind of considered a faculty development guru type genius person. And also John. And
I'm still stuck on the
praise.
John is a mountain bike genius person.
Something like that. Okay, Anyway. This paper is by Gurpreet Mand and colleagues. They're all from the University of Toronto. This is a 2024 paper, Identifying the Exceptional Learner in Medical Education, a Doing versus Being framework. This is in Medical Teacher. I think it's the June edition in 2024. So I entitled this episode, Learners Got Talent. And so let me set this up. Our health professions education literature has done quite a bit of work on learners and difficulty. It's kind of a subgenre within our field. Lots of papers. There's got a couple of textbooks now about how to do remediation, some of the parameters. People have done epidemiological studies of learners and difficulty with various definitions. And apparently you can sort of generalize by saying that learners and difficulty comprises 3.5% of our training community. But there's almost nothing published about the other end of the spectrum, and that's learners who are exceptional. So could teachers and educators, if you ask them about exceptional learners, would we even agree on who stands out positively? And I was just making jokes about genius and talent, but let me just also include a little bit of a reference to this lit. So genius, for the purposes of today's episode, is I'm going to use the psychological reference to individuals who seem to be born with exceptional abilities. John on his mountain bike, perhaps. Talent is individuals who have worked really hard to acquire exceptional abilities. As we're recording this, the Olympics are on, and so a bit of genius and talent on the TV every day. We also know that if you really want to excel in higher education, that IQ is not enough and that marks are not enough. So what does it mean to be talented? And that's kind of the basis of this paper. If we focus on the talented learner, somebody who works really hard, what are their characteristics in the health professions? Have we all seen them? Would we all agree who's in this category? Does using this label even make sense? So I'm going to throw to all of you. What do you think of this topic of exceptional learners? Should we even bother talking about this? Is this an important topic to you? Have you met an exceptional learner? I'll throw all of those on the table. Let's go, John, Linda, Lara.
I love this topic. In fact, I'm involved with Teresa Chan and some others at doing a big grant that's trying to look at talent in medical education. It's the TIME study, which took us a little bit of time to get to that. See what I just did there? Acronym. I think that we have this incredible selection process that chooses the top of the top in health professions. And then our systems are designed to find the people that are on the low end of that scale, 2 standard deviations out. And we spend a lot of time in the literature, and you can find it about the learner in difficulty. It's nice to think about the other side. Competency-based education, which is slagged a little bit for talking about the word competence rather than excellence, is really an attempt to say, can we develop systems that acknowledges a spectrum of ability across a spectrum of competencies that allow the people to excel and to move forward rapidly? And I'm going to flag a little bit one of the problems I have with this paper. I'm not sure of the definition they're going to use. We'll get to that in a second. So when I think of a definition of genius, it'd be someone who can't misspeak 3 times in a row. It's tricky. Is it knowledge, as you alluded to, Jason, or is it a really rich and complex series of competencies that all work together to achieve the goal of your practice? I think when I think of genius, I think of someone like Kobe, who had perseverance, who had accountability.
Define for those who don't know.
Kobe Bryant, basketball.
Yeah, probably the greatest point guard of all time. I like Michael Jordan better, but he was a shooting guard, not a point guard. And Magic, I don't know really what he was.
No.
Let's
throw down Simone Biles.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Simone Biles.
She's the greatest of all time.
Is the greatest gymnast of all time.
Yeah.
Nadia Comaneci, maybe. I don't know. But what I found with all of those, whether it's Simone, whether it's MJ, whether it's Kobe, whether it's anyone, is it's that continuous, sustained perseverance. Kobe never lost in one-on-one at any event. Maybe a difficult person to live with, but their commitment to greatness was ongoing perseverance. So I bristle a bit when I hear about genius is born, not made, because I'm not sure if that's the case. I think there needs to be sustained dedication and excellence, which is then hopeful for people like me. You alluded to me being a great mountain biker. That's not the truth. I want to be better. I think I'm getting better. I'm going to get those training wheels off any day. But I like the promise that you're not born a genius mountain biker, and then there's future and hope.
Okay. Linda?
I agree with you, John. You could be a late bloomer when it comes to mountain bikers. But when I think about some of the exceptional people who I've worked with as trainees and later on as colleagues, it's kind of like that saying about, I don't know about art, but I know what I like. I don't know how to define exceptional, but I can certainly see somebody who is exceptional. And sometimes you can pick it up even before you know very much about them, or before the exceptionalness becomes obvious. And we're talking about sports, and as Jason said, we're around the Olympics, and I've been seeing all of these clips of, the javelin thrower 20 years before as a 2-year-old throwing a javelin, or the young gymnast doing a somersault before they could walk type of thing. So, it may be that there's a combination of both. What I would also wonder is there, how much of it comes from the person and how much of it comes from what we call the upbringing, the training, even before people get to med school and residency.
Nature and nurture. The
nature and nurture thing.
Cool. Just before we go to Lara, John's now invoked this whole sports episode that we're having. And it occurs to me that Ben Kinnear's listening, and he is obsessed with baseball stats. So I'm sure he's going to send me an email after this episode listing all of the other athletes in baseball that we forgot to mention because of all their stats. And he'll give me P values and Cohen's D and several other maybe mountain biking references. Who knows?
Yeah, but does that make him a genius or does that make him talented?
I think he's talented.
Makes him a nerd, I think is what it makes him.
And that's why he's our friend. But
yes. Lava?
So the only comment I want to make about the introduction is I actually struggled a little bit because I do believe in studying excellence. I do believe in what we would call appreciative inquiry. We find people with who modify the best or strengths or what have you in a particular domain. And we study that to try to understand how they get there, what makes for that success. But I really would love to suggest that what we need to do with this paper is change the question a bit, because what I'd like to say, the question that they have, or the question I expect that they would like to have, is what does exceptional look like in our context? Because I suspect that exceptional will be very different in different contexts. I think, for instance, exceptional communication in a pediatric outpatient setting is very different from excellent communication in a palliative setting. I think that exceptional communication in Toronto is different than it is in Taipei. So I think one of the things that I would like to point out or suggest to these authors as they look at their paper is to suggest maybe a better justification for the statement would be to understand how teachers identify exceptional for their context and these concerns.
That's fantastic. And great segue to some of the elements of this. Context seems important. Let's see if you think it's been addressed adequately. You also just reminded me of, since it's the Olympic week, somebody posted on socials this hilarious video. I have no idea where this video came from. Maybe somebody listening knows. And it's Usain Bolt doing a 100-meter with a bunch of late night talk show hosts. And they're all racing him. And he barely gets out of first gear and they're falling and having heart attacks. It's interesting to watch. Context. All right. So enter Gurpreet Mand et al. These are from the University of Toronto in Canada. These authors recognize the gap in the literature and set out to describe the characteristics of exceptional medical learners as experienced by a group of specialist family medicine physician supervisors. This study also, for other piece of context, took place in the setting of during COVID. So why should we care about this topic? This is what the authors said. They suggested from their lit review that 3 to 5% of our community are identified as exceptional learners by various definitions. The authors argue it's important to find these people out. So here's their 4 arguments. I'm really curious at the end of this whether you buy any of these arguments. Number 1, we should identify and recruit future medical leaders. This is the best and brightest argument. It's like we should find them now because they're our future department head. Number 2 is we should tailor curriculum for this subgroup as part of CBME. This is the no learner left behind argument. Number 3 is we should avoid neglecting them, because if we neglect them, we'll negate their talent and it'll lead to a paradoxical underperformance. This is the shrivel on the vine argument. They're fine, so they don't get any teaching. And number 4 is prepare them to make future exceptional contributions. This is the higher curve argument. They're already starting high. Let's get them higher. So Lara, Linda, John, do you buy any of those arguments? Is this important to study?
Linda was waving, so I want Linda to have a chance to go first.
I'm not sure I buy all of these or any of these because it's an external person pushing them to do something. What if they just want to be a good doc and they don't want to be a Nobel laureate or the department chair? The implication here is we have to identify them so we can do something with them. And whether it's to be a Nobel laureate or change the curriculum for them, I'm not sure that's a good idea.
Okay. I guess one of these arguments that they put forward was that we would do something for them, the sort of the no learner left behind one. Lava, do you want to add any comments? Is this important to you?
I think it's important to study excellence. I think it's important to study the general middle, if you will. I think it's important to study those who struggle. That said, the justifications they offer make me a little nervous. So I'll just pick one. It makes me nervous to think that since we are going to decide what exceptional looks like, and then based on these criteria, we're going to expect you to be a leader in the future. There's a lot of water under the bridge between we identify you as exceptional at admissions to one day you should be a leader. And again, just because we identify you as exceptional in this context, in this way, doesn't necessarily hold in other contexts over time. It's a bit slippery there.
Okay. John, do you buy that?
I'm going to dichotomize their rationale in two ways. I agree with the rationale that says it's important for teachers to be able to define and recognize exceptional learners so that we can make a most of their educational time. That was the whole argument for CBME. We don't all progress in lockstep, and we don't have all equivalent abilities starting. And as we move through training, that we have individual pathways and individual pace. And so we need to go from a one-size-fits-all model to increasing tailoring our education. So if you can understand who is your 2 standard deviations out, then that's helpful. Their other argument, though, I don't buy at all. So great leaders, that's being a great clinician is a different set of competencies than being a great leader.
Yeah.
We've all seen that really exceptional administrator who nobody wants to have them care for you when you are sick or unwell. And that's also the great future contribution, whether it's as an administrator or as a researcher or even as an educator. That doesn't necessarily tie one-to-one to your abilities as a clinician. So there's an inattention to what the literature talks about around content specificity, which is a different way of Lava talking about what does great look like in this context. Moreover, it's not just contextual, but it doesn't follow across all of your abilities as a human, let alone in your physician various roles.
Yeah, that concerns me as well. The one that does resonate with me is that different learners on different paths might have different needs, and we should meet everybody's needs if we're really dedicated. That one interests me. All right, so let's dive into methods. So what they do, the authors say that they conducted a qualitative interview study with a variety of university-affiliated community-based teachers who have been identified as having supervised exceptional learners, either med students or residents. Okay, this one's kind of interesting. So to find their subjects, their participants, they phoned up or sent an email to some site chief, and they said, hey, ever have any exceptional learners? Oh yeah? Who supervised them? Oh, great. I'm going to contact them. That's how they found their people, right? So then they reached out to them. They interviewed them individually. They asked them about exceptional learners, what they look like, and so on, characteristics. So they did transcripts. They did content analysis. Then they thematically coded with constant comparison using in vivo. The authors then grouped themes into a unique framework, which I'll introduce momentarily, and they did a reflexivity statement. So I'm going to ask you all, do you have anything to say about the methods? So John, Linda, Lara, do you like the methods?
I have three big categories of things to say. I have some problems with the methods, and so I'm going to try to keep my speech minimizing the speechiness. The first part is, if you ask somebody who is an exceptional learner and you give them no guardrails, I think you get a real mixed bag of responses. And they don't give, and I know that they're trying to find a definition and they're trying to unpack it, but they didn't even say an exceptional clinician. And then they group, you can choose between a medical student and a resident. And they use this example of clinical reasoning. And what it looks like to reason as a medical student is just to get all the details organized and formulate a differential diagnosis. That doesn't get you any credit as a resident. So those are not even the same phenomenon. So how you reason as a resident ready to enter practice is a very different thing. So their population of question is so heterogeneous, I'm not sure what's going to happen. The second part is they use this theory, and I want to go a little bit on this for a second. They talk about Miller's pyramid. This is a ubiquitous phenomenon in health professions education. It's time we put a stake through the heart. George Miller, who I'm not sure if he's still alive, but I'm sure he'd be equally outraged. He got brought back about 25 years ago to deliver a keynote at RIME, Research in Medical Education, a big US conference. And the Miller Triangle is just a transcript of the speech he begins. And he starts by saying, I'm not even sure why I'm here. I really haven't contributed much to medical education in a long time. But here's some thoughts that I have. And it comes with a triangle or a pyramid. And you'll all love it because pyramids are all the rage in 1990 in medical education. This is not a theory. This is someone's opinion. Now, I get it. I'm a king of opinions without any theory or evidence. And so it's a little bit rich for me to be too critical. But for just a moment, can we all agree that it's time for us to be far more critical of pyramids, and particularly Miller's pyramid? There's no evidentiary basis for it. And so if you're using this as the theory to inform or the sensitizing lens for your work, I think it's a non sequitur. And then the final piece, and so this is the detailed piece of it. I went to the interview guide. This is my new thing with qualitative studies. I'm looking at all the questions. It's a 45-minute interview. They have 15 questions. If you've never done a one-on-one interview and you try to get through 15 questions in 45 minutes, you're doing it wrong because you can't get anything rich because it takes a while for you to explain it. There's no digging deeper underneath the surface. And moreover, a third of the questions are about demographics, which they can collect in different ways. And a third are about residence and difficulty. What study are you running? I want you to ask and spend more time asking you about the phenomenon of interest. And so there's ways that make me question the methods. I don't think there's a fundamental flaw here at all, but I just want to point out, first part is, I think they have a heterogeneous mix. Second part, they have a sensitizing concept or a theory that's not a theory. And the third part is, I think they don't get the richness in their data because they spend time on questions that, what's it there for? Is it part of another study that doesn't get reported here? Perhaps.
So agree, John. Boy, twice in one podcast. That's amazing.
That's so weird.
Yeah.
This is my day.
But I want to explore a little bit how they found their participants. So first they had to find the exceptional learners, and then they had to find the supervisors of the exceptional learners. And if someone asked me who was exceptional, I could come up with all kinds of definitions, but I could also say, and this becomes interesting later on when we look at the results, I could also say, it's a learner who really helped me get through my clinic faster, or who didn't call me, who was able to make decisions on their own, so I could go and do something else. And so because we don't know if they defined, I don't believe they did define exceptional to the people who were then going to send them to the supervisors, we don't really know who we've got. And then there's the next step of, do the supervisors really think they're exceptional? Maybe it was just the department chair. So I'm a little bit worried about that part, the selection part here.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm actually on board with that concern. My understanding of what they did was they said to the supervisor, they said, I'm not going to tell you what's exceptional. So John, this is supposed to be authentic, even though it's heterogeneous, even though this is interpretive. This is all in everybody's lived experience. But they said to the supervisor, have you guys had an exceptional learner? Oh yeah, we've had exceptional learners. Who supervised that exceptional learner that you're thinking of? And that's how they found them. They didn't tell anybody what the definition was. No guardrails, is my understanding. Lava, do you have any comments about these methods, and remind us about content analysis? We talk about this a lot. Yeah.
Yes, for sure. So first, I'm going to start by saying I agree with everything my colleagues have said. So I'm not going to repeat any of that. What I want to do is I want to make one comment, and then I'll spend a minute on content analysis. My one comment that I want to make about the methods is that the methods section, just in general, in my opinion, and of one opinion, but it's my opinion, that your method section should have some breadth and depth. So if your method section's really short, it's got to be really good, because you're skipping over a lot of details and things that are really important. And the method section of this manuscript is quite short. And in fact, there's a section in there that I think is actually for the discussion. So there are some pieces in there. There's content in the method section missing. Yep. that gives me cause for pause. I start to get a little nervous. But what I do want to spend a minute on is content analysis. So this manuscript gives us an opportunity to talk about content analysis and why, when you choose this methodology, it's really important to understand the specificities of different research methodologies. So content analysis is a label for a family of analytic approaches. And the authors in this study chose to use the traditions from a manuscript by Shea and Shannon in 2005. It's a very commonly cited paper. And that manuscript offers 3 different kinds of content analysis. And these authors chose to do conventional content analysis. Fine, no problem. In this tradition, conventional content analysis is used to describe a phenomenon, and the researchers do not rely on preconceived categories or theories to apply to the data. Instead, this is inductive research. That's fine. We study the data to develop categories inductively. So to analyze the data, you start by reading the data, you derive codes by doing word-by-word analysis to capture key thoughts and ideas. And then while you're doing that, you're simultaneously making notes of analytical impressions and thoughts. And this is your initial analysis, right? That's level 1 analysis. Then you generate labels for codes that reflect more than one thought, more than one idea. Those codes are sorted into categories based on different codes and are related and linked together. And these categories are then organized into meaning clusters. There's something really important there that I never said. I never said the word themes, because in this tradition, they don't work from themes. And this is where, unfortunately, our authors of our manuscript start to run into a little bit of trouble because they veer away from conventional content analysis methodology. They do some interesting footwork where they describe some of the resources that they rely on. And those resources talk about qualitative research in general and in general terms to justify their approach. But those general concepts don't necessarily map onto conventional content analysis. So for instance, like I said, conventional content analysis doesn't use themes. Thematic analysis does, grounded theory does, but conventional content analysis from the Shea and Shannon tradition doesn't. It's just a problem then when the authors start talking about the themes they developed. And they also talk about using constant comparison. Well, constant comparison isn't part of conventional content analysis. Now, side note, it's fine to borrow. You could borrow constant comparison from a different tradition. That's so fine that you have to explain to me that you did and why you did and the justification for that. What did it add? Why was it necessary? So, and just one last thing, in the manuscript, the authors offer this statement, and I'll offer to you verbatim, quote, "A constant comparison method was used during the coding process as per standard protocol," end of quote. So unfortunately, what I have to say is there is no standard qualitative protocol. That just doesn't exist, I'm afraid.
So just before Linda jumps in, I want to agree with a lot of what you said. When I read that, I read it a few times, and my understanding of methodology is not the same as yours, Lava. But I felt like there was kind of a salad of methods here. And I wasn't sure if that was fancy footwork, if that was kind of slip of the fingers when you're typing, if reviewer 2 made them throw some stuff in, or if they just didn't explain enough or justify that they did one thing and then another, and they had a reason to do another. I definitely have a problem with the pyramid. We're going to talk about that in a second. Linda?
So I wanted to ask about the pyramid because, Lara, you said this methodology was inductive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet they're not bringing in stuff from the outside, and yet
there it is.
There it is. There's that triangle. With or without the top of it, the is added on to the dots. So did they just bring that in afterwards, or I don't quite understand how that fits in if it's all inductive.
I was wondering if they forgot to justify it, or they ran out of words, or whatever.
You know, honestly, that paragraph in the method section, I thought belonged in the discussion. So one of the things that might very well have happened is, and we know it happens, is that a reviewer, a comment, a something gave them reason to move a section of a paper, move a section of the manuscript around, or those sorts of things. All kinds of things happen during the revise and resubmit process. I totally get it. But again, go back to comment 1. This is why I really would like to encourage listeners to think about the depth of description they offer in their methods. Because the shorter your methods, the less content there is there for me to know what's going on. And now I have very few words to go from, and I have to take what you give me. And if there's not a lot there, then there's not a lot for me to work with.
All right. I love these results. So 15 interviews were conducted, and they used the phrase until saturation was reached, which always makes me wonder how contemporary that people's thinking is, but that's okay. This is where the pyramids come in. They refer to those pyramids that we've made fun of already. The George Miller and then the Cruz et al. Pyramids that followed afterwards. And they said they used them as kind of a guide. This is my wording. Endorsing the idea that competence builds out of knowledge to demonstration to being. John's already hammered that down, is that's not a theory. There's no empiric basis for that sequence. It's just kind of a short form. It's an idea that our entire community uses in conversation. It's almost cultural, but I don't think it's actually a basis of a theory that I've ever seen.
It may not be, but you could call it a model or a concept or something like that. It certainly has some, and again, I'm going to use an old-fashioned term, but it has some face validity.
Perhaps, yeah. I think of it more as I'm trying to think what the expression is. Maybe John knows. It's like an idea that's in your community. It's like a short form. You use it because everybody knows what that phrase is. It sort of kicks around. Anyway, they use that, and then doing all that magical content analysis, they developed what they call the doing versus being framework. Those are both capitalized. And to illustrate the characteristics of exceptional learners, for those of you who are audio only, picture a Venn diagram. On one side's the doing circle, and then there's the being circle, and there's a little bit of overlap. They define the doing part as acquired concrete actions you can see. The being part is kind of innate characteristics of an exceptional learner, and it has to do with things like attitudes and approaches. What's in the doing bucket? It's clinical reasoning, it's advocacy for patients, it's demonstrated dedication, like coming in early to a clinic, it's working independently, it's something they called co-curricular involvement, but really it's other contributions beyond clinical. Being was identity as a physician, in this case, self-direction, curiosity, and maturity in their reasoning, the appropriate level of confidence, not too much, not too little. And overlapping between the two was communication skills and interpersonal skills. I found this really fascinating. This came out of their literature. This is what the supervisors said of exceptional learners. When I was reading it, I was really struck that this sounds like a list of at least a lot of the components of CanMeds. It was like the CanMeds framework all over again. Canada uses CanMeds. The teachers definitely use CanMeds. So are we just using a subconscious framework to articulate what good looks like? I was wondering when I was reading it. The next paragraph in the paper actually talks about, yeah, we noticed this looks like CanMeds. This was a very curious framework for me, and I left there not really sure that I was any smarter about what an exceptional learner looks like, but maybe that's just me. I have people in my head I've met who are exceptional learners to me, and I thought they weighted a little bit more on the being side than the doing side of this. So I really am curious what your impressions are. And Lara, you may or may not have a reference to a medical exceptional learner, but I'm wondering if you could all think of an exceptional learner right now, does this framework resonate with you? I'm going to go Linda, Lara, John.
So like you, I think the being side resonates more than the doing side for me when I think of one or two exceptional learners. But I go back to what I said a bit earlier. If you look at these things, this is also the kind of person you'd like to have with you on, a clinical service of some sort, or in a clinic, or on a shift in the emergency room. Not just that they are exceptional learners, but they are exceptional in that they're going to help you get through the day a little bit better. So I think there could be a little bit of bias there.
Isn't that just entrustment? I can let this learner does more for me, or is able to be delegated more. And entrustment, good. I mean, that's funny. Is that really an exceptional learner?
But the other thing is, they spend a lot of time on exceptional and not a lot of time on learner. And, as you're really thinking about the exceptional learner, that might be someone with a growth mindset and all of those other things that didn't really come in here. Maybe they did, but they didn't mention it with those words.
It wasn't top order, that's for sure. Lara, what do you think?
So you asked if this resonates for me for a strong learner. So if I think about, for instance, the graduate students that I work with, if you take clinical reasoning off, these map onto that. But that again tells me, for instance, that these are really quite generic, and they're really quite generic in probably North America. But I can also suggest that, there's a really good reason it looks like CanMeds. We ask people for an exceptional learner, and CanMeds is how we assess people to see if they're doing well. So it makes sense that when you try to identify an exceptional learner, you're going to think of the CanMeds framework and people who have ranked well against that. So, and then when you describe it, because that's how we assess learners to decide if they are or are not exceptional, then it makes sense that those criteria bleed into the answer. So this is when I start to get a little bit nervous about questions of transferability. For instance, as we know, a new CanMeds model is going to be rolling out at some point in the relative near future, and that'll change what the criteria are. And I wonder if these categories of being and doing will change with it, probably. But I think the other part that I would love to just challenge a little bit is that these competencies are going to look really different if we do this in Egypt or Nepal. And what does curious look like, and how do we value that? And all sorts of things. We did a paper not so long ago where we talked about medicine as a talky culture. So if you're someone who enjoys expressing themselves and says a lot of words, John, sorry, did I say that twice? What? Then
or p-values. Don't forget p-values.
Don't I have the control on the mics on this show? Like
I thought so too, something. And yet, but that may not translate well into a different culture, which then means that those, these are things that I just worry are not necessarily. We have to think carefully about how they transfer. And one last thing I'd just like to say is that we have to think too about how our society evolves and changes, and what will advocacy look like. So right now, I think a really exceptional learner would be someone, for instance, who decides that the perfectionist ethos that has traditionally held sway in medicine is something we need to push back against, and that it shouldn't be part of our ethos. But it excludes a lot of excellent people if I say that.
All right. This is getting bigger and bigger. John, help me here. Does this framework help you think about exceptional learners that you've met?
Too long didn't read. No. I want to be careful, which is research is hard. And if you read some of my papers, you go, ooh, they set this up in their own way. And sometimes it's an operational or a feasibility issue, or sometimes you get in and you realize, this is trickier than we thought.
John, I just want you to know, I never think that. I never read your papers.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, there. Yeah. Well played. I the hook got set for that one. If my concern was the guardrails, my concern was the richness of the data because they asked some other perhaps distracting questions. But I also started with the assumption that I don't believe in the nature piece. There a long time ago is a surgeon's born, and they just magically appear with hands.
Yeah.
And that's not a model of what an excellent surgeon is. And I don't know any of the excellent surgeons I work with or that I teach with that would ever articulate that. So this model they call doing and being, which is just a rework, as far as I can determine, of nature versus nurture. And I don't believe even the categories. They talk about identity as being a nature, or maturity being nature, or confidence being nature. But those are all things that we have a whole literature that you acquire over time, your professional identity. And my own confidence, thankfully, is getting less because I was probably overly confident too early in my career because I didn't know what I didn't know. But these are all things that follow an arc of experience. And so I think on their diagram, they have things on the wrong part. But then even at the level of granularity of what can I do with it, they say stuff like communication. And I'll just read the line that says, faculty really felt that good communication skills were a sign of exceptional learner, and most possess this quality. And that's pretty much it. I agree. An exceptional learner probably has great communication skills, but talk to me about what those look like.
Yeah.
I need another level because we are expecting all of our trainees to be able to communicate. And when they define exceptional as the learner recognizes themselves as a family doctor, is that enough differentiation between exceptional and competent practice or others? And so I'm not sure what I do with the results of that. And it doesn't ring true for me, but that might be a function of there's more to come. and there might be a juxtaposition of another paper. Maybe my recognition that they had a third of their data around the difficult learner, there might be another paper coming that juxtaposes this against it. And I think I should be cautious about being too, what do I do with this, until I see the full program of research that comes from this. So that's where I'm at.
Awesome. Okay, so here's the author's conclusions, and I'll give you an opportunity to weigh in and any final comments momentarily. The authors concluded that their doing and being framework, remember, this is a literature that's pretty empty right now, that this helps to us to identify exceptional learners early so the curriculum can be tailored to their unique needs. So this is an interesting paper. I got to tell you my bottom line. I picked this because I really like the topic. And I thought, yeah, a qualitative study of supervisors might actually get to some insights about exceptional learners. But I didn't feel like I got the payload at the end. I didn't feel like I had new insights. I felt like I got a lot of text telling me that people who are at the top end of a CanMed scale or any competency framework scale are good, are people that stand out. I thought exceptional learners would be something more than that. So as an example, I've coached a whole bunch of kids in hockey for 30 years, and I've met some geniuses by their definition. People are just born natural athletes, and man, they just arrive with so much raw talent.
They had raw talent, but
Yeah.
they became genius hockey players because they got coached and they repped.
Yeah.
Gretzky is great, not because he's just born that way.
Yep.
He practices more than anybody else.
So that's the second half of my paragraph. Thank you. Is that I've also met people who just worked their tails off and got better and better and better. Sometimes they cross each other. Sometimes one got better, one whatever. But there were definitely different archetypes. And I could probably talk a little bit more about that if someone interviewed me about what athletes look like in those categories. And I felt like I wanted a bit more. That was the thing about this paper. I was so excited for the topic. All right, so here's a couple paper clips I offer. Some people in our community, and I hope if you're listening to this that you might email us. They may prefer to reframe this paper's operationalization of talented or exceptional learners is actually a conversation about developmental arcs and the nature of competence. Because there's a whole other conversation going on out there that may supersede this one. The other thing we want to just emphasize as a paperclip is we're pretty obsessed with stepwise pyramids to explain fundamental concepts, but they're just kind of like short forms. We should be very careful not to treat these as evidence or theories in themselves. All right, super scientific voting. Let's do a little commentary on the methods and the implications for others who are listening to this episode. So Linda, John, Lara, can you give me a 1 to 5 about the methods? What'd you think?
So I'm going to give it a 3. I really had to push myself to give it a 3. I thought probably it was a bit less. We talked about the frailties of the methods. I'm a bit sympathetic because they probably had a word count limitation, and I think that probably limited them to some extent. But there were clearly some problems with it.
John.
Okay, go.
No, it wasn't. It was you.
Okay.
But
I don't want to go second, so there.
Right, princess.
Rules are not for me.
They never have before.
I'm going to give it a 2 for reasons stated.
Okay, Lara?
Same too.
Yep, I'm going to give it a 2 as well. Great topic. I thought I bought their premise, I bought their beginning logic, and then they lost me in the methods a little bit. Okay, and what do you think about impact of this paper? Is this a start of a body of literature? Is everybody going to cite this as the beginning point, and then we're going to build up from there? Same order: Linda, Lara, John. Lara really second this time.
Well, that's good. So I'm going to give it a 3 because I think it is a start, and because it's a really good topic. You know, the first time I read it, I thought it was quite readable and understandable, and I'd like the being and doing until I thought about it a bit more. So I think there's nuggets of things there. They just haven't been expanded on the way I would like. So it's a good, solid average.
Okay, we got nuggets. What do you think there, Lara?
I'm going to give it a 2. Unfortunately, this isn't a paper that I think is going to launch the conversation in a really rich way. It's very descriptive. It offers a clear set of descriptions. But for my work, it's a 2.
Okay, John?
Same for me, a 2. I think it's important to acknowledge when you dig into a field or dig into a question that the field really hasn't engaged with, it's hard slugging, trying to be that trailblazer. But I'm still going to turn to models like Dreyfus and Dreyfus that offer a richer interpretation of what expertise and exceptionalism, which is kind of an unusual term to use, is. I've already told you about the struggles I have. I just can't make heads or tails of their framework, and I don't see how I would ask the next in the sequence of questions from that framework. I'd probably return to frameworks outside of health professions education.
Okay. I'm going to give it a 3 because I do think this is a pioneering paper. I think it will stimulate other people. I was just looking for more richness, so I could use this paper more often. I could refer people to it and so on.
Hello, my name is Teresa Chan. I am one of your longtime listeners and I think the first-time caller to the Papers podcast. I wanted to write in and submit my voice memo to really highlight some of the things that were recently discussed in one of your recent episodes around qualitative research reporting guidelines. I wanted to highlight that there are actually 2 different reporting guidelines that you kind of mix together in one go. And I wanted to highlight some of the key important features of each of these reporting guidelines. The first is the COREC, or Consolidated Criteria for Reporting Qualitative Research guideline. That is a reporting guideline that helps and improve the transparency, completeness, and accuracy of qualitative research studies in their terms of their reporting. Reporting guidelines, as you point out, are meant to help scaffold authors to ensure that they've written out all of the parts so that a reader can critically appraise their work. Meanwhile, there is also the SRQR, which is the Standards for Reporting Qualitative Research. And this is the paper that's written by the famous Bridget O'Brien. She is one of the fellow editors at Academic Medicine with me. And so I have the privilege of working with her quite often. And I would say that the SRQR is my personal favorite reporting guideline for qualitative research. But that being said, I have also used the COREC in terms of a scaffold for critical appraisal and have used it often in the case where I'm looking specifically more at health professions research rather than health professions education research. And so in health research, I find the COREC is a little bit more useful and it does have more items in it. So I would encourage everyone, if you're looking for reporting guidelines, a great resource is the Equator Network website. So you can just go to Google and Google Equator Network reporting guidelines, and then you'll find a treasure trove of many reporting guidelines, many of which are sometimes overlooked or not used enough. And so I would encourage you to consider looking there if you're ever in a bind or on a podcast and you need to look something up really quickly. So thank you very much for all that you do for keeping us up to date in the Papers podcast. And I'm excited to have had this chance to do a bit of a soapbox rant about some of my favorite reporting guidelines.
So there you have it. There's our episode. And we would love to hear from you. What's your take on this topic? Do you agree with this discussion? Do you think this is the most amazing paper ever? Because we'd love to hear from you. You can reach us on the web at paperspodcast.com, or you can reach us at thepaperpodcast@gmail.com. Boom.
Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody.
Take care, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Good mocking.
Everybody.
Take care, everybody.
Take care, everybody.
You've been listening to the Papers Podcast. We hope we made you just slightly smarter. The podcast is a production of the Unit for Teaching and Learning at the Karolinska Institutet. The executive producer today was my friend Teresa Sörö. The technical producer today was Samuel Lundberg. You can learn more about the Papers Podcast and contact us at www.thepaperspodcast.com. Thank you for listening, everybody, and thank you for all you do. Take care. All right.
I want to jump in one thing. I'm going to break the fourth wall here. And I want to ask a question to the three of you. How come...
What the hell are you looking at? Oh, it's his other camera.
Adam,
Sorry.
Adam himself.
His other camera. And this fourth wall, are you all right with this? Is there a problem? Do we need to discuss it?
So if you're listening to this as audio only, you will not appreciate the advanced visuals and production quality that I bring to this.
The multiple heads of John.
Face for radio. How come we get Lava to go on and we are just fascinated and regaled with her stories of qualitative methodology? And God help me, if I say anything about a p-value or a t-test, I'm hissed and booed off the stage. See?
No, I think a p-value and a t-test, these are important things for us to talk about. I'll always listen to you. Go on, John.
Your p's are important, John. They are.